That's how I came about to this work that developed over times out of my regular work with groups, which is we did large events on the Holocaust integration between Germany and Israel. We did it in different cultural contexts later on. And then I got to understand through this work, through kind of learning by doing, I got to understand certain things. One is, and that's what in our conversation is fantastic, because I find somebody that is interested in the same things that I'm interested in or came to similar conclusions, is that trauma is not an individual issue. Trauma is a collective net, and that this collective net becomes a societal structure. And that societal structure is what we have been born into. And we call it normal. We don't call it normal when it happens to us, but we call it normal because out of the place that is traumatized here, we create relational agreements that become structures in consciousness. And then I understood, wow, when I saw those, when we came into this collective trauma release before, we always experienced like a collective suppression or denial as a symptom. You cannot breathe, it's very heavy, it's very, like there are certain symptoms that most of the people in the room start to express through their own internal experience. So it's not an individual experience only, it's individual and collective. And the more I understood, wow, that actually lives. This heaviness is in us 24/7, not just when it happens in the group. That denial is in the complexity of our nervous system actively happening all the time. And so health and health issues, individually and collective health issues, are actually amazing regulation functions in the societal body that prevent us from being flooded by this material all the time, while we sit and work at the computer in our office, at our universities, or wherever we work. And then I understood, wow, the massive amount. What is trauma? Trauma is the down-regulation or the shutdown in our nervous system, and it comes with a degree of disembodiment. And our response to climate change is way too slow because of an enormous amount of disembodiment within our society. And so that gap creates an anesthesia, like a mass anesthesia. Like we don't feel certain things together. And trauma limits my capacity to see you. Where I'm traumatized, I don't see you, although I think I see you. Certain parts of me cannot feel relational context. And this means the relation between people, but also to our natural environment. So we don't respond from the natural part of us that responds. We have a delay. And I think that delay is a serious condition at the moment. In many ways, in the way that we are responding too slowly, but we are also sitting on a potential bomb. That collective trauma material, as long as it's not triggered too strongly, is kind of a dormant force in the society. But if the environmental pressure gets stronger and the new crisis will get stronger, that's gonna come up stronger as destructive tendencies or separation tendencies in society. And so that's what we were kind of exploring before together.
So when it comes to Elizabeth's question that she feels this panic around it, this terror around it, what would you say to her?
I would say two things. Usually what we feel in a given moment has nothing to do with the given moment.
Right. Okay.
I would be interested what the fear is about when it overshadows. So the fear is usually a certain amount of past that overshadows the current experience. And so when people say, oh, I go to take an exam at the university and I'm scared, I would say, I hear that you're scared and I'm not sure that this is something to do with your exam. So I believe that, so there's individual past that comes up when we are confronted with certain experiences. So I would go and would look, okay, how can we create a space where this fear has a space to be co-regulated, like has a space to be in relation and present. Because we don't want to disregard the fear. We say the fear is real. The interpretation on top of the fear is mostly not true. So I am afraid of, I love it when we stop.
At the I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
Period, yeah. That's exactly right.
And I'm afraid is something that is true, that usually we can feel in each other, and we can give a space to digest the past, to digest that fear, until it's being transformed into free energy. And then we can look at the question of the climate crisis, kind of with a cleaner screen or a cleaner inner space that is more available to really feel what's the situation about, the direct experience of the situation. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that now we are, and that's also what you described before, is that the individual experience is always interrelated with the collective dimension. So I often say, when you look at me, you don't see me. You see me in you. That's a difference. I am a wave in you. I am a brainwave pattern in you. Your perception transforms me in a Thomas in you. But that's very important. I'm a particle and I am a wave. In here, if there are 100 people looking at me, I'm a wave, a collective wave pattern that is more or less synchronized. But what you see is maybe similar and is maybe also different from what's sitting here. Because your whole past, and vice versa, what I see might be out there, but maybe not. I can only say what I feel and what I see. I don't know if it's true, because it arises in my perception. And through communication and resonance, we can find a mutual world. And so, in the mutuality of the society, that's the same thing. In the society, there's a lot of fear at the moment that we share, and that also triggers and amplifies our individual fears.
Is it also possible that some people are just so sensitive that without negating what we've already said, which is that, well, the Course of Miracles says that we're never upset about what we're upset about. So that's one dynamic that you just talked about. Is it also possible that some people are just so sensitive that they feel all the fear that the rest of us have pushed down? In other words, that her sense of panic is to some extent a function of the denial in the collective body?
Yes and no, because clarity per definition is clear.
Yeah.
So even if I feel let's say I have access to the unconscious dynamics here in the group, and I can be dialed in to the unconscious, the unspoken elements within a group, let's say. Even if that's true, I'm not overloaded or overwhelmed by the dimension of the group. So clarity means I know what I feel, and even hypersensitivity. What is hypersensitivity? There are some people who their nervous system is more sensitive, for sure.
Yeah.
So we pick up stuff easier. And we need to learn to live a lifestyle that meets that sensitivity, because the sensitivity is a blessing. But sometimes people say, oh, my sensitivity is a kind of a burden. No, the sensitivity is not a burden. The lack of grounding and soil inside of ourselves is with this sensitivity together becomes a burden. So because our nervous system is supposed to ground that energy, if I'm overloaded, it's not my sensitivity. It's the lack of kind of grounding of that sensitivity that I feel I'm too overcharged. So then it's a signpost for me to say, okay, I may be very sensitive, but I need support to ground that sensitivity to make it a blessing.
Of course, it's also true that a lot of kids growing up are told that you're too sensitive. Don't be so sensitive. And what's really being said is that I don't know how to handle what I feel when I sense your emotion.
That's right.
So, and that's the shaming. So don't be that way.
That's right.
So then people start suppressing their sensitivity and making it into a problem. So then you come into this group and you say, I'm afraid to be a burden to other people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid if I reveal my problem, if I reveal my distress, it'll be a burden on other people. And it's just a memory of being sensitive and other people not being able to respond to that in any kind of a healthy way. Now I'm going to come to something else, if I may. So you're very much into collective experience, collective trauma, group process. So everybody here, I don't have to spell this out in great detail because everybody here experienced it. So yesterday we went through where there was a disturbance or a loss of energy or a loss of connectedness that many people experience. And then this morning we spent some time processing that. So, but we didn't so much talk about it as a group experience. Everybody sort of gave their own particular response to it. So I'd be interested, Thomas, to hear you talk about, if you would, the group as an organism, and what a group experience is like, and how disturbances can actually teach us about something. Mm-hmm. Is that a meaningful question to you?
Yes. Let me see. So in my understanding of like also of the spiritual, I start with something to give a context to what I'm going to say. So there is, in my understanding of the kind of spiritual practice in the culture that we live in. So we are not living in a monastery in Tibet, or we are not living in a cave in the Himalayan mountains. We are here and we are looking how to bring more awareness, more mindfulness, more presence, more clarity, more relatedness into our life. And that means we need to practice two things. We need to practice kind of a state awareness. What is a state awareness? Through meditation, contemplation, prayer, different practices, yoga, tai chi, whatever. We create an inner field of coherence that is able to more and more host the fragmentation that is within the system. And that creates kind of a witnessing capacity. So one thing, when you say, I need to give an example to come to your question, that a group is like we are all musicians and we are playing an instrument in an orchestra. Let's say we love Bach, and then we go to the symphony and we listen to the concert. So the grown-up perspective, the I, is a collection of functions. So when I learn to crawl, when I learn to walk, all my levels of psychological development, they become musicians in the orchestra of the I, of the self. So the self is not a thing, it's a composition. Same as a group, we are all a composition, and it's kind of a fluid field. Now, if the group presence is high enough, or if the self-awareness, let's say the mature perspective, when we look at the process of a person, you share a difficulty and we look at your process, we look at, okay, what's the perspective that you can hold that process in? If there is a regressive process, usually we go into a younger place, but within a grown-up perspective, or the grown-up perspective falls apart, and the person really believes that the feeling is true. Whereas the feeling is in me, it's relatively true, but it doesn't guide my decisions. That fear is not running my decision, but I'm aware of being afraid, being ashamed, being sad, being whatever. And so in the group, it's the same thing. When a group goes through a process, sometimes we feel that we hit an unconscious fragmentation or issue, and then this group coherence starts to tumble, or like it's kind of a bit hit. And if we can stay present to it, and everybody reflects it back to their internal physical, emotional, mental state, and then the second thing that I think is important in the process work is I relate to every human being. Everything that happens in you is inherently intelligent. It's only the question on which level of your development. So that whatever seems like a dysfunction is a function on another level of our development. Which means every symptom that shows up in the group, if we really allow us to relax into let's say the low energy. And then I go and say, okay, so if everybody presences that low state of energy, that can have two reasons. Either something went off in the group process, so we lost the wave together. Something happened in the group process that wasn't on, what they call on. It didn't have energy. So we missed the point, and then the energy goes down. That's one symptom. The other symptom might be that because we are coming closer together, we trust each other more, our nervous systems allow more unconscious stuff to come up, and more collective symptoms show up in the group space. And then when that happens, the kind of the low energy and the fragmentation needs us all to be really present in order to create a coherence that holds a consciousness that is aware of it. Because if not, we all take it as personal symptoms, we collapse back into our self-contraction, and then the group loses its higher capacity. And that's, I think, also like what in an awareness process is the chance in an experimental group like here, that we keep the presence that hosts that fragmentation, which means we feel tired, but because we are determined to stay with it, everybody explores it, and it keeps our whole presence in the room. Or I start to get distracted, tired, start to space out, and then the whole group process goes down. But that's an amazing learning, because if, for example, climate change brings more climate disasters, or the state of the world goes into a more severe crisis, that's gonna happen anyway in the society. Higher functions of consciousness will be challenged, they are not stable enough, and easily we regress back into earlier, more primal functions of consciousness, like survival, self-protection, whatever, separation, that might run the show. So in a group process, we have a chance to learn about these two elements. So I think that there are two, either there's something happened in the group that didn't meet whatever was needed in the group at that moment, and then many people recognize this consciously or unconsciously and drop out, or there was a collective something that showed up and that needs us to be the hologram for it to show its form. So the whole musicians are needed to play that piece of music. And so I would say then, okay, I would invite everybody to say, okay, when we take a moment and everybody goes to examine exactly how does that tiredness, fragmentation live in your body? How does it live in your emotions? Are you dissociated, or can you say still what you're feeling? What's your mental state saying? And if everybody comes back into that inner presence, that usually starts to become the overarching function that can host it. And then I would see what shows up and let people voice a bit what's in them. And usually the one voice will express the energy wave in the field.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm just going to want you guys to... I just want to give an opportunity to a few people here, if there are any, who would like to pose any questions to Thomas before we thank him for his visit. Yes?
First of all, I also want to say thank you, because it's very generous to invite me here. I'm very touched when you asked me before to come here. I feel very honored to do this. I mean, I know it's your...
Well, if it's generous to ask for a gift and receive it, then I'm a very generous person. Thank you. Yes, Dream, do you have the mic?
I do.
Okay, please go ahead.
Is that on? Yeah?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, I feel this is absolutely fantastic medicine, exactly what I needed. My question for you is, when you describe this process of what could be happening in the group field, and it could be this or it could be this other, is it possible that both were happening? Because that was my sense of that there was both a break in the wave and also this collective unconscious representation of what is in the group field and the collective cultural field.
Absolutely, yeah. And maybe one is the expression of the other. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Alex in the front here. Is there somebody at the back first with a question? No, then here, Alex.
Thank you. So my question is, I'm not familiar with your work, which is next thing for me to do. So you work with groups, as far as I understand. Each group consists of individuals. So how do you balance that individuality and group works, and what are the challenges and what are advantages, disadvantages, if you can kind of compare individuality with group work?
So there are two principles in the healing work, as I understand it. So, and I'm combining a little bit what the mystical traditions, the wisdom traditions say, and what maybe our trauma knowledge and our modern neuroscience says. So, in our inner work, we start with the closest circle of intimacy, and then we move outwards and we expand our radius of healing. So when in doubt, come back to yourself. So in doubt, if we deal with collective issues, let's first see if that's your issue. Because some people say, oh, I feel the pain of all the women or all the men or all this or all the nature. Like, great, let's see if that's first your pain. And maybe that's the pain of your own development, the fear of your own development. And when we are more solid in ourselves, and we feel that a person rests inside, him or herself, then we can deal with collective issues more sustainably. Otherwise, we will all get mixed up and confused. So we need a base, we need always a ground. So how much earth and ground and soil is in us that can really speak sustainably about a collective dynamic. But collective dynamics, as you're saying, are very important because they might kind of lock the individual dynamic in its place. And then there is no healing possible, because healing, the next element of healing is always creating the right environment for healing. Healing is being able to create the right environment so that the conditions that created the disease can be released in order for the system to start healing and upgrading its inner coherence. So if that's true, then a group is actually an environment for the individual to change that internalized condition. And that's a very powerful thing, because it means that what I said before, if I am a wave in everybody who looks at me right now, there's a strong interaction between this particle and this wave. And so that field that is being created between us has an enormous power. And I think group presence processes are incredibly powerful and incredible healing resources. Which means if you share something about your life and you bring your process here, and we witness your process. What is witnessing? Witnessing is not that I am an audience. I am not an audience here listening to you, like a consumer. As a group participant, I'm a participant. So I'm participating in this process. So when you ask me something and I'm open to really receive you, I feel your body, I feel your emotions, I feel your inner state while I listen to you. And this means I open my inner world, you open to a certain degree your inner world, and then we create a mutual world. That mutual world gives a meaning to our meeting. That's the meaning of our relation. And so the deeper that is, the more intimate we will feel is the space that we create. The closer we will feel with each other, the more vulnerability we can allow, the more safety. And when somebody feels safe, stuff can come up naturally. So, and the group, so when you speak and we receive you with at least a certain amount of participation, I am actually a participant in your life, in your reality, in your experience. And that creates that the wave in a representation in the group has a rebound effect on your inner consciousness, which means actually us presencing you and I talking channels energy into our interaction. And so when you are working with your group, everybody in the group that is present, even if I get tired and I'm aware that I get tired, I check out, I come back, if I'm aware of that, I actually support this process in unfolding its highest healing potential. And so the group presence and the individual being a little bit vulnerable and showing something more than just a protected self, together become an upward spiraling field that becomes more and more intense. And then when you have a healing, your healing ripples out and touches everybody, especially the people that have a similar resonance like you have. For some of us it's closer, what you experience, for some of us it's further away. But and your opening triggers more opening. And the more we support this with the right ingredients, every group becomes a healing power. And that's, a fantastic. So in a way, when we respect this, the closest circle of intimacy has the higher priority. We are very mindful of the energetic unfolding in the room, and we see the interaction. And that's in the Bible. There's a lovely, although many people, cast out the religious, but there are many good things. For example, what does it mean on Mount Sinai? Even the voice of God spoke, and there were the people around, and everybody heard the voice of God. And at the end, everybody said, and it spoke exactly to me. It said, it spoke to me personally. It was not an over, like a generalization of truth. No, everybody walked away and said it addressed me personally. And what that means is that the highest universal principle is always reflected in the most unique experience. So, and the interaction between the universal and the most specific is truth. Which means my deepest humanity also becomes my highest possibility. Resting in my deepest humanity as a human being, being able to sit here in my vulnerability, in yours, and in your potential landing in this, your whole intelligence being expressed that way, is the highest possibility. And there's a beauty to that when everybody speaks, everybody has a truth for the whole. Not the truth, but a truth. So your experience is meaningful for us because through you I learn something that I cannot learn alone. And through you I learn something that I cannot learn alone. And so everybody who shares is an enriching quality because we all learn from every unique life story is a composition that is an expression of the most universal principle. And so, and that's what I call in my work, we call this reading the book of life. So there are many books that describe stuff in society, in the face of the time. And then there are a few books that describe timeless qualities. And then there's one book, and that's this. And relational coherence and presence allows us to learn directly from the book of life, which is relational attunement.
You know, in the Jewish Yom Kippur holy day, the wish that people give one another is, may you be inscribed in the book of life.
Right. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, danke vielmals. Thank you so much.
Dankeschön.
Thank you.